Welcome to College Compass by experts at scholarship.org. For the past 42 years, the staff at the George Snow Scholarship Fund and scholarship.org have dedicated themselves to empowering young people and ensuring that they have access to the resources they need to succeed in their educational journeys. In each episode of College Compass, we'll sit down with experts to provide practical advice that will help students overcome challenges, thrive, and maximize their college experience. My name is Tim Snow, and I'm the president of the George Snow Scholarship Fund and scholarship.org, and I'll be your host for today's show. So welcome back to part 2 of our guide to financial aid. Today, we're going to focus on how to choose the right college for your educational goals. And really, our topic is going to focus mostly on choosing the right college for your financial situation. Joining me again today is Leslie Cornwell, who is our Vice President of Scholar Services at the George Snow Scholarship Fund. Leslie has over 12 years of experience in the scholarship world and specifically working with our scholars to help them navigate the college experience. And joining Leslie and I is Austin Havass. Austin is our Scholar Services Coordinator here at the Fund. And Austin, what I had mentioned earlier, is a little bit newer to the organization, but brings some very valuable real-world experience on the subject of financial aid and student debt. Leslie and Austin, I appreciate you guys taking the time to be here and to share your expertise with our listeners. I wanted to take a look at my notes because we had part 1 not too long ago, and we covered some very important topics in that episode. I want to encourage anybody who didn't listen to that to go ahead and do that. Like I said, I think they'll take a lot away from it. But really, we were talking about the different forms of financial aid that's available to students: grants, loans, scholarships. We dove into the different forms of loans and why loans should really be a last resort. We gave tips on submitting the free application for federal student aid, which is known as the FAFSA. And again, really want to encourage people to look that episode up, listen to it. I think you'll be glad you did. And some of the terms that we're going to use in today's episode are covered in that episode. Leslie, we're going to air this episode at a time of year when students are hopefully getting their acceptance letters. They're all checking their mailboxes and every day to see what they get and what they bring. But I wanted to check with you and ask you really, when they do receive these things in the mail, what should they be thinking about really as it relates to college financial aid?
Well, that's a great question. And hopefully, like you said, this is going to be a really exciting time of year. Starting usually February through April, students will get hopefully acceptances to all of their schools. I think what's really important to encourage is that you temper your excitement. You're thrilled you've been accepted, but you put a pin in it and you pause because there are a lot of things that you need to consider. Your school is going to be telling you, you need to send us this non-refundable deposit to hold your place. Usually you have until May 1st to make that decision, so you're not going to harm yourself, but you need to be able to make this decision financially soundly. And what I mean by that is all you have received at this point is your acceptance. And what you haven't received is your financial aid package. And you can't possibly decide where you're going to go to school without receiving that financial aid package.
So what does that mean, financial aid package?
Financial aid package is what the school is going to send you, and it's going to tell you, you're going to see exactly what your bottom line is of what you're going to owe. So usually the way that these are prepared, the top of it is going to be a breakdown of the cost of attendance, which Austin is going to explain in a few minutes. And then underneath that, it's going to have all of the possible aid that you have received. Now, if you've received outside scholarships, like if you received a scholarship from us, the George Snow Scholarship Fund, is not necessarily on this package, and that's important to point out. But what it will have is, did you qualify? Did you do the FAFSA, and did you qualify for a federal Pell Grant? Did you get any award from your state? Did you get any institutional aid from your school? All of these things that we talked about in the last episode, those will be there. And then you have the bottom line of, this is what it is going to cost you per year. Now, what I will say is that usually this financial aid package is not going to be mailed to you. Most schools, when you create an account with them to apply to the school, you now have a student portal. And that may be where you had to go find out if you've been accepted into the school. Not every school will mail you an acceptance letter. You may have to be logging in and see your status on your portal. That's also where you're going to want to become very familiar. You would go to the financial aid section. You would want to keep checking this regularly to see when your package has been posted, or they may email it to you. And as most of us know, most 17, 18-year-olds do not check emails. Right. So you have to check your email. This is how they are informing you of not just financial aid, but the entire time that you're in school. But you need to not rush. You need to take your time. You need to look at every financial aid package of a school that you have been accepted to or waitlisted, because you're still in the running there, because you can't possibly compare apples to apples without knowing what it's going to cost you. And most importantly, this is the student's responsibility. The student has to be the one that is checking for this, that is pulling these packages, that is doing this research. It is not the parent's responsibility. Your grown-up time starts now, and the students need to get familiar with this process.
Yeah, and that's really important to point out, because any student debt that the student incurs, or at least most of the student debt, is really going to be, it's their responsibility.
Correct.
And this is the time where everybody's got to start taking this stuff very seriously, because student debt can have some serious negative ramifications to your lifestyle. If you incur a lot of it, you're going to carry that. It's not forgivable. Until you repay it, you're going to owe it.
Correct.
And it's certainly, I've seen examples where it impacts people's lifestyle because they have this debt. Now they can't buy a car, or their credit's not as good as it could be. Or that delays starting families and buying homes, all kinds of craziness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So very, very important for our listeners to understand that. Austin, can you go over and share with us, that there's a term that we hear a lot in the scholarship world called cost of attendance. And I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners, really, what does that mean? And then is there a difference between the cost of attendance and the student actual cost to attend that school?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, for many students around this time, they believe that their cost of attendance is whatever Google tells them. I know that because I speak from my own experience. When I was searching up schools that I would like to go to, or colleges that I wanted to go to, I was going on Google, and it has a nifty tool in which you search the school that you want to attend. You have this little blurb that Google provides that says average cost before aid and average cost after aid. The problem is that neither one of those numbers that are in the front page result when you search up the school is your actual cost of attendance. The real cost of attendance is found through the college's website or the school's website, or on your financial aid package, as Leslie described. But let's talk a little bit about that question you asked, which is the cost of attendance. The cost of attendance is the full cost to go to the college or university for one academic year. Okay. And that typically includes, we put it in our financial aid and debt guide for college students, that includes the tuition and fees, the living expenses, the books and supplies, transportation, and personal expenses. But let's start at the top. So the cost of attendance has your tuition. And many students, like myself, thought that the tuition was the cost. That's how much it costs to go to university. Whatever I saw for tuition was how much it costs to go to university, but they are not the same thing.
Absolutely.
And there's actually other things. If you are deciding to live on campus, you have living expenses, such as room and board and meal plans. So living expenses, the room and board is basically you being able to live on campus, whether that's having a room, that's splitting a traditional dorm room, or doing some type of communal hall or on-campus apartment. Those facts and figures will vary depending on the living situation you as a college student would wish to live in. Additionally, you have the meal plan, and there's different tiers of meal plans. The college is only going to give you the generic thing on the school's website, but when you choose your meal plan, when you commit to the school, you'll get to choose which variation of meal plan, whether you want a specific amount of meals per week, whether you just want to cover 2 meals or 3 meals a day. That also includes insurance as well. But the thing is about that is that schools will automatically levy, if we remember going through some applications and seeing our packages, that schools will often levy insurance. That is an optional expense that's typically excluded outside of the cost of attendance. But you'll see that underneath that living expenses type of fees. If you have insurance already through your family, for anyone's listening, if you have insurance for your family, you do not need to purchase that additional insurance. It's not necessary. If you do not have insurance and you wish to obtain insurance, that could be a tool in which students can get low-cost, affordable insurance. Additionally, you have books and supplies. Tuition is just not the final figure when it comes to classes, point blank. You have books, supplies. Schools may require you to have a laptop computer. Classes may require you to have access to varying levels of programs and platforms that you will have to purchase on your own dime. Right. Schools will put that into the cost of attendance and show you. And it's for Florida, we have over $1,000 on average per year just for books and supplies alone, which is a big thing to consider. You have transportation. These are the costs of getting to and from the college. Whether you are going in-state or out-of-state, there are some travel expenses incurred on that, especially if you are deciding to go away from home. Lastly are the personal expenses. These include everyday expenses like toiletries, clothing, entertainment, etc., that a school factors in for you for as a part of a budget line item. Now, the common misunderstanding that we see with students is that they believe that a scholarship that they receive will cover the full cost of attendance. Many students confuse the aspect of having a tuition waiver or a tuition-based scholarship as that full ride, and that actually removes that whole thing from the equation.
Yeah, and we've seen that. I know we'll sometimes when we call students to be interviewed, and they'll share with us, they said, well, I really don't need your scholarship anymore because I've got a full ride to go to school. And we've learned that we really need to ask them about that because most of the time, maybe they got a letter that said, your full cost of tuition is covered. But the cost of tuition is really only about a third of the cost of attendance. And so it's really important for our listeners to understand all these different expenses that they're going to have, room and board, all the things that you just mentioned, because that's 2/3 of the cost to go to college. And so it's wonderful when you get a scholarship or some grant that pays for your whole tuition. That's great. You got 1/3 of the cost already taken care of, but there's 2/3 that you're still going to be responsible for in some manner, or maybe you'll get more aid, which is everybody's hope, but it's very important to be aware of that.
Absolutely. I mean, when it comes down to the end of the equation, like you said, factoring in that 2/3 of a decision may be enough for some students to actually think, man, this college is way too expensive for me. This college is going to be way too expensive for my family to take on, will put me in loads of debt. And that's where it's important for students to actively consider, at that case, like, don't give up on this college dream. What a lot of people do not realize is the beauty of local colleges. sure, you don't you might have to be a commuter on campus, but the costs change dramatically. I mean, when you're factoring in around 13 to $23,000 to attend school and live on campus, that's taking that $13 to $23,000 out of the picture when you're factoring in attending a local college. And sometimes students feel that, if you stay close to home or you have to live at home, it's not the same college experience. Commuters typically have the same, or if not, a great college experience as those who live on campus. Also, they get to live at home, and the money that they receive from financial aid can be used in other ways. The costs that they incur and the debt that they might have to incur may be less than if they said, you know what, I'm just going to try it out. I'm going to go live on campus. I'm going to spend that $13,000 a year. It may sound in your mind like it's going to be easy peasy to pay off, but unless you're really in the zone to get some type of financial aid, scholarship, and awards, that 13,000 adds up very quickly.
Yeah. Well, not only does it add up, like you say, it adds up very quickly. It's times four if you're going to go to a 4-year institution. And we're from South Florida, and we've got some great colleges that are literally in our hometown. And I would really encourage listeners to seriously consider that as an option, because that's really probably the easiest way to knock out, or at least have a chance at graduating from college with no student debt. Because a lot of people, if you have need, you're going to get a Pell Grant. You might get some state programs that will help you, like our local Bright Futures, and you can graduate debt free. And like you said, Austin, they can still go to the football games and everything and all the activities on campus. You're just going back home versus going to a dorm, and you got to really weigh the the cost benefit of that when you're making a decision, which is really what we're talking about. Do you have any stories, Austin, you can tell us about maybe somebody that you worked with at the scholarship fund that maybe made a bad choice on where they wanted to go to school?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are right in the middle of our scholarship payment season, but in another time there was a student who had committed to a college that they couldn't afford. They wanted to go. It was the dream school. They were dead set on it. There was no talking them out of it until they realized that that dream school came with an installment payment plan that they had to enter. And that first payment plan was around $10,000. And that was only the first payment due in 2 weeks. And there was 3 more after that.
Yeah.
Those are going to be the hard learning lessons for students to have, in which they realize this is not good. This is not good for me and my family anymore. And they have to make that unfortunate decision to change schools.
And the time to think about that is before you go to a school, and that kind of brings us to our next topic a little bit. But remember, you go to a school, you're leasing an apartment or you're signing a contract for your dorm or whatever it is, and you're obligated to that. So you really got to look at all your options and do kind of what we're talking about here. Do a need or a financial analysis of it, cost analysis, and because it really does get expensive if you don't do that. So I think the example that you're giving, Austin, if I remember it correctly, was a student that went out of state to go to college, and so can you explain to our listeners the difference between in-state tuition and out-of-state tuition? And even take it a step further and talk about the tuition at a private institution versus a public institution.
Absolutely. So the difference can be twofold or threefold, and I'll explain why. Because we're based in South Florida, typically when the Florida public schools have in-state tuition, and this goes for many other states for those who are listening, in-state tuition typically is a lot less than out-of-state tuition. If you are a resident of that state, for example, if someone lives in New York and they're a resident of New York, a high school senior in New York, would like to attend a New York State college, or if they live in Florida, like most of our scholars do, they are a Florida resident, and in which they are now classified as an in-state college student. That in-state college student is typically subsidized from the out-of-state cost. Now, let's say if a high school senior based in Florida that lives in Florida decides they want to go to the University of Alabama or another school, they would have to pay out-of-state costs.
Right.
And out-of-state costs could be double, triple, or even quadruple the amount of the in-state cost. In fact, when we designed the Student Financial Aid and Debt Guide, we found that for Florida residents attending a school on campus in Florida, the average tuition and fees was about a little shy over $6,000. If they decided to go to a school outside of the state of Florida within the southeastern region of the United States, that tuition and fee cost before financial aid jumped up to $31,000. And again, that 1/3 of financial aid comes into play because that's still only 1/3 of that student's cost. So that comes into how in-state and out-of-state is different. That private tuition is going to be a little different in as which it doesn't typically matter whether the student is an in-state student or an out-of-state student. They will still get charged that same cost at a private institution. Now, that private institution's cost could be very, very high, and that can lead to huge monthly loan payments after college. For example, the University of Miami, as we found, costs over $90,000 a year. It's a great school, but again, it is very expensive. And $90,000 a year's loan payment could look dramatically different than a school that is in-state or even an out-of-state institution.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember this was some years ago, but it was a story in the national news. And it was about, I believe it was a young lady. And she, we talked earlier about, your dream school. And I won't mention the name of the school. It was a prestigious university in the Northeast. And she attended that school. It was very expensive. It was a private institution. And at the minimum, she was paying out-of-state tuition. And she was studying journalism. And I think by the time she graduated, she had $120,000 in student debt. And the problem that she had is that as a journalist, a first, newly graduated journalist, the entry-level salary for that profession is not, it's not that high, unfortunately. It should be, but it's not. And so she definitely attended her dream school, but she paid a big price for it when she graduated. And now she's got to think about repaying that on a salary that is maybe, below average. And so it's a big deal. And it really, I know in that story, it impacted her life very much in a negative way. And again, that's what we're trying to get out here today, is to encourage people to really give this a lot of thought. It's so important and has so many ramifications to your life after graduation.
Absolutely.
Let's see. So, Leslie, beyond tuition, Austin talked a little bit about it, some of this stuff, but what should students take in consideration when they start calculating their total cost of attending college?
Well, before I get into that, I want to make one other point on the cost of attendance, because that's going to relate to my answer to your question. But when you're looking at this financial aid package, you need to keep in mind that there are billed items and there are non-billed items. And I think it's extremely confusing for anybody going through this for the first time, because if you were just to look at, let's say you're living on campus, and you get a bill. Well, your bill would be for tuition, room and board, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But those are just the billed items that the school is going to bill you for. What Austin was talking about when he talked about a miscellaneous transportation cost, and that'll differ between schools, or insurance, and that'll differ between schools, or books, or incidentals. Those are all non-billed items, meaning the school is not going to bill you for those other than possibly insurance, but they are things you have to budget for. And this is just an estimate. And so you can't get really focused on what your bill is going to be and think, oh, well, this isn't as expensive as I thought it was, because then you run into the problem that we're going to talk about right now. And that is that 2/3 of your cost are room and board. So your room is where you're going to live. Your board is how you're going to eat. So many colleges require that first-year students live on campus. And depending on the school, many schools and particular dorms require that you purchase a meal plan. So as Austin described, there's a lot of different types of dorms. Years ago, there was only one type. You lived in a dorm room with a roommate, and you have a communal bathroom down the hall, which means everybody on that floor is sharing that bathroom. That's not the most popular choice right now, but they become more expensive. If you want to live in a suite style dorm where you and your roommate are in one side, then there's a communal living room, I guess you'll say, and then on the other side is 2 more people. Much nicer, higher price tag. So you have those options. And I also want to point out, if you are interested or if you are required to live on campus, you have to register for housing. Students don't realize this. They wait until, it's almost May 1st, or they've made the decision and then they register for housing. You're not obligating yourself to anything. But if you don't get into that housing queue, you are going to either have no housing because they will run out before they get to you, or you are not going to be able to take your pick of what you want. You want the lowest number possible. So that's tip number 1. But when you make this decision, the decision of an on-campus room means that you will be signing a housing contract that is in effect for both semesters. So you start school, you realize, ooh, you know what? The dorm life isn't for me. That's too bad, because you have signed a housing contract. So this is something that you have to give a lot of thought to. People give, I think, more time and thought to who their possible roommate's going to be, which is also important. But you need to be thinking, can I afford this dorm? So that's one type of housing situation. If you're not required to live on campus, or you don't want to live on campus, and you rent an apartment, now you need to budget for a year's worth of rent. You are going to be required to sign a lease, and not you. You're going to have somebody who has credit, who isn't 17 and 18 years old. They're going to have to sign the lease, guaranteeing that this debt is going to be paid. And it doesn't stop when the school year ends. Oh, I'm done with the school year. It's May. I'm going home. Well, your landlord feels differently. They don't care if you're living there, but you have to pay rent all summer long. So you have to decide, well, am I going to try to what's called sublease, find somebody to take over my rent? That's what everybody's trying to do. Some are lucky, some aren't. These are all things that you have to think about when you're trying to determine that real cost of attendance. And you can't break these leases. It's again, you get into the apartment, there's a problem. You have to deal with it as a grown-up. You contact the landlord. It isn't, well, I just want to go home now. These are legal contracts. If you break them, the ramifications to your credit are long-standing, terrible. So this is not how you want to start. And then, as Austin alluded to, you have the whole cost and issue of transportation. Even if you're living locally, how are you getting there? And even if you're going somewhere not from home, is there a bus route that I can get to my campus? What's the cost of that? Am I allowed to bring a car onto campus as a first year student? And if so, how much is a permit? And can I even get a parking? I think anybody who is currently attending school or attended school has a horror story of their own of trying to find a parking spot and make it to class on time without getting in a fight. I mean, it's just an impossibility. And these are all things you have to think about. And not only that, but the maintenance of the car. Can you afford the gas, the insurance? So there's a long litany of things. And then if you're going out of state, as Austin was talking about, well, how are you getting home? You have Thanksgiving and Christmas and spring break. Are you flying home? Can you afford that? A lot of things. I know I'm just throwing out thing after thing, but that's what you have to. That's why I said when you get this acceptance, don't rush.
Yeah, it's really important. And, just little things like you said, it's great to think, oh, I have a car, I'll bring it to school. But I can tell you, and I went to school a long time ago, that the parking situation at the school that I attended was insane. I could never find a space. And then finally I ended up renting a space at a gas station, which cost a ton of money. But it's a fight every day to try
Right.
to find parking, and people don't understand that. And like you said, then you got the cost of insurance for your car, all the different things that go along with that.
And there's one other point of having a car. You will find everybody likes you, but they only like you because you have the car.
Yeah.
So you're the one that's going to be doing the grocery runs and the restaurant runs and everything. And 15 people are going to try to, go into your car. So it makes you a popular person, but not in the way that's healthy. And I do want to stress, our scholarship fund has emergency fund money that students can apply for. I cannot tell you, it's just so much on the rise where students are saying, I need money because I can't afford my rent. I can't afford food. Austin, wouldn't you agree? This is like what we see almost daily. There's an emergency fund request coming in saying, somebody sent one in saying, I'm very short of money. And there's going to be a hold on my account. And the question is, how did you not know that you were going to owe this money at the end of the semester? And now how are you going to handle the situation? Because if you don't pay it, there's a hold on your account. And, how have you not thought about the rent and the food situation? And the problem is one little hiccup in your life, one little trip to the doctor, or, your car has a flat tire, one little expense that you haven't counted on, and now you can't pay your rent.
Yep.
But again, your landlord doesn't care. You're legally obligated to pay it. So these are just all things that you need to think about.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. That sort of reminds me of a young lady that we helped many, many years ago. And I think the story I'm about to tell, I think was told in the local paper that this young lady was so good at it. But she made this whole topic that we have today sort of like her job. And that includes, researching other scholarships and then looking into all the different costs that, she's going to incur. And she did it. And every school is going to have different costs. If you go to the Northeast, or let's say somewhere up north where it's cold, you're going to need winter clothing.
Good. Right.
If you go far away, you're going to incur additional travel costs. And even, I know some schools that are big, popular schools that are like, I don't want to say they're impossible to get to, but they're not impossible. I mean, to get there, it takes you all day.
Right.
Because you've got to take like a plane from this city to that city, and then you take another one to Atlanta, and then you take another one home. And so those things are all important to consider, especially, when we talk about that. People coming to visit you if your parents are coming up for Parents Weekend or something like that. But she was really amazing in the sense that she created a spreadsheet with all of this information, all of the schools, and she estimated all these different expenses that she's going to have. And she did a great job with it, especially a great job with searching for scholarships. And she did the same thing with the scholarships, did a spreadsheet on that. I'd encourage people to do that because it gives you a visual of what your costs are going to be and what the difference is. And you can you really do need to be creative in the sense that, okay, if I'm going to go to, a faraway school, again, the travel costs. or the climate of the school. And then the other thing, she knew what she wanted to do, and her profession was going to be a fairly high paying profession. But in the end, she made the decision to stay local. She was actually studying ocean engineering, and our school, our local school here, Florida Atlantic University, has an amazing program for that. So she stayed here. She ended up graduating completely debt free, but she worked it. It was she would tell you it was like almost a part time job for her in her senior year of college, but she did a great job of it. And in the end, she graduated with her degree. I know I can't remember. I think she's out in Austin, Texas, working as an engineer now. But she would tell you that it was absolutely time well spent, and I would agree with her on that, especially when it comes to minimizing student debt. Austin, what else should someone consider before committing to any specific school?
So just like how you mentioned, it's super important for a student to consider the academic offerings at the school that they want to have, especially for the career field that they want to do in the future. Just to give an example, if you're going to a college that is generally very expensive in cost for you and your family, but you are not taking the time to determine, okay, this cost is affordable and the career choice that I choose, the major that I choose, is going to benefit me in the long run, then you're incurring on extra debt that you're not going to be able to pay back, at least on the level and the time that you would like, compared to how much you're putting in for that degree by attending that school. But another important thing besides academics and majors is the aspect of campus culture. You need to find a school that you fit in, right? It is important to be challenged and to explore new environments and explore different things and embrace diversity. But it's also important to feel at home at the university that you wish to attend. It's one thing to just attend a college or a university that everyone looks and feels like you, but you want to also make sure that the college that you're choosing has the ability to make you feel represented. You want to feel representation, but also you have to think about beyond representation, beyond diversity, and the interminglings between them two. You have to think about campus, the surround culture of the surrounding area, right? Uh, for some schools like we have in the state of Florida, it's in the middle of a pretty much a not either a city town or a very barren town or rural. And you have to consider, okay, I'm going to this campus to be on campus and stay on campus and not go anywhere from campus
Right.
because there's nowhere for me to go at the end of the day. I'm going to go and sit in the dorm at the end of the day. Now, without not name dropping any names, I was considering going to school in the very up northeast at one point until I found out it was much of a similar predicament. Even though I did feel like it would have possibly been a good fit, it was in the middle of nowhere. There was an ice storm the day that I went to visit it, and then I realized, what am I going to do next? I'm a Florida kid and everything, and I wanted to challenge myself, but what am I going to do next at the end of the day?
Right.
I'm just going to go in my dorm, and that was the only thing that you could do. So these are all very important things to consider before you commit to a specific school. And that's, again, with the beauty of local schools is that while some people say, well, I don't want to stay close to home, I don't want to do this or that, I don't want to see the same people I've always seen, you know the area.
Right.
You know you can get the expectation out of the way because you can find ways to make your time valuable. And that's something that some of us don't want to consider, but know at the back of our minds, like, hey, I can make this work.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think we're coming to the end of our time here today, but I really want to thank you both again for sharing your expertise and your real world knowledge of this topic. It is so very important to our listeners and to the young people that we serve that they take the time to invest in themselves and to understand all the ramifications of those decisions that they're going to make now and the ramifications, good or bad, in the years to come. So, as Leslie and Austin know, one of our goals here at the Scholarship Fund is to help as many students as we can navigate the often confusing topic of college financial aid. So, with that in mind, we've created a downloadable booklet that covers a lot of the topics that we touched on today and lots more. You can download this 16-page document to learn more about college financial aid and student debt and strategies to minimize that debt while in college and after graduation. Just go to scholarship.org, FinAid, to get your free copy of the Financial Aid Debt Guide and college student for college students. So in closing, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to College Compass by experts at scholarship.org. In our next episode, we're going to go into the topic of interview skills, which will be a timely topic for students who are scheduling their scholarship interviews, but it's also going to be great information for any students who are interested in honing their job interview skills. In the meantime, you can learn more about us by visiting scholarship.org. And for more tips and updates, don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram and LinkedIn at George Snow Scholarship Fund, and on Facebook, TikTok, and X at Snow Scholarship. And as always, we look forward to guiding you through your educational journey.